Thanks for joining us. This is your host, Taylor Bradley, and you're listening to the Troop HR podcast. Hello, welcome to the show. This is Taylor Bradley, your host. Today, I'm joined by Lan Phan, who is the founder and chief community builder at Community of Seven and the author of Do This Daily, Secrets to Finding Success, Happiness, and Purpose in Work and Life. Lan, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Taylor. So excited to be here.
A lot to dive into today. And as always, for the listeners, I always like starting at the ground floor. So if you could just give us some insight about Do This Daily and a quick TLDR of what the book is about.
Yes. So the book is really about how do you find your purpose, and more importantly, how do you actually live it? I always kind of joke around that a lot of people have shelf help, which is they have all of these self-help books that just sit on their shelves. And I wanted to create a book that was actually actionable. When I first created the book, it was actually a program that I had, a one-year program that I had went through with CEOs and founders. When Community of Seven was initially born, it was masterminds with different leaders. So they were founders, they were CEOs, etc. And the whole goal was to go through this one-year program where we figured out people's purpose and we create an action plan to actually how to live it. And so I realized early on that it wasn't my passion to make successful people more successful. So I really wanted to focus on democratizing training and development because I really firmly believe that's how you create an equitable society. And so this is where Do This Daily was born. And I instilled all of that knowledge in 4 big chapters. And so the way I created it was really for busy executives. So you could either a lot of the readers actually read it in one sitting, but then you're meant to go back, have it on your bookshelf with a journal and read 1 page, 2 page a day and do an activity. And so this is why it's called Do This Daily. It's about the daily practice. It's not just about read it once and forget it. It's about how do you actually live these concepts in your daily day-to-day life.
The concept that you brought up that's really intriguing to me, and I'd love to get a little bit more of an elaboration on it, is that you're democratizing the talent development for folks. What does that look like on a practical level?
So from a practical level, I look at it like this. It wasn't until I got to the age of 42, 43 that I first got my first executive coach leadership development training, even though I had spent 20, 25 years managing teams. I think about how much damage I could have created as a leader. And being in corporate America, seeing how many toxic leaders there are because you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of times leaders are promoted because they're good at what they do. Maybe they're a good salesperson or they're a good HR practitioner or a good marketer, but they've never been taught actually how to lead. And so we create this vicious cycle of bad toxic leaders creating more toxic leaders. And so I have this firm belief that if we really democratize development, because everyone within an organization is their own leader, even if they're an individual contributor. So what are the concepts of, my goal has always been to elevate purpose-driven leaders specifically, because I have a firm belief that purpose-driven leaders understand how to develop and nurture talent. Just because you're a good manager doesn't mean you're a good leader, but every good leader is a good manager. And so it really requires that the skill sets and the hard skills of being a good manager. But the whole concept of leadership, inspiring people, coaching people to be better. How do you become a force multiplier where your presence makes everyone around you better? That's servant leadership.
I do feel that this gets lost sometimes, is a purpose-driven leader can also not myopically focus on the bottom line, but if they develop and lead their team, it can lead to better impact or outcomes or revenue for the business. Yeah. What are 2 or 3 practical things that are strong traits or hallmarks of great managers?
Yes. So let me give you a quote that I have always kind of lived by. When I was a general manager of See Her, Mark Pritchard, who's the chief brand officer of P&G, was our chair. And he used to have a saying, and personally, I think he's probably one of the most powerful servant leaders around. Talk about force multiplier in terms of engaging and motivating his team and also being a force for good in society. But one of the things he used to say to our team is companies need to be a force for good, but also a force for growth. Because at the end of the day, if all businesses are there for a purpose, so even though you're a purpose-driven company, you also need to generate revenue, right? Generating revenue is about the managerial skills of, right, creating systems and structure for your team, having transparency, having guidelines. It's about hiring the right team. It's about providing them adequate training and development. It's about having clear goals and visions of what success looks like, having clear KPIs for your entire team, and also about enforcing. And when I say enforcing, it sounds a little bit harsh, but you need to have consequences, right? And so those are the managerial things. As a parent, if I gave no consequences to bad behavior to my children, there are going to be some issues, right? So as a caring parent, as a loving parent, I need to be clear with my expectation of what good behavior looks like. I have to give that clear vision of what the ultimate goals look like. I always think about Peter Drucker's quote, what gets measured gets done. And if you don't have a clear measurement goal, how do you expect your team to navigate towards that? So there's that basic managerial, like 101. On the leadership standpoint, it's about building trust. It's about building psychological safety. It's about having a vision of where you want your company to be 5 years, 10 years from now. The big difference between, I would say, managers is that they focus myopically on the quarterly goals. However, quarterly goals will not necessarily lead to long-term stability of a company and growth. The leader looks at things 5, 10 years from now. The leader looks at his employees not as a line item, but as a crucial part of the organization and believes in nurturing and growing that talent.
I really like the symbiotic nature of how you tied those two together. In a prior guest, Melanie Arano had talked about having that accountability isn't a bad thing. It's actually a critical thing to drive success within the business. And Kimberly Scott's book, Radical Candor, if you don't address that through accountability, similar to you were talking about your children. I'm a father of two, try to balance that, but you don't want to have ruinous empathy is the terminology that Kimberly came up with. Last episode, we had Helen Dayan on, and we talked about working in a multi-generational workforce. And one of the items that were brought up is both Helen and I are millennials. And there was a period of time, maybe hard for some people to recall, where millennials were treated a little aggressively in news stories.
Yeah.
And one of the key contentious topics that came up was this annoyance of other generations that millennials fixated on wanting to work in places that they felt that they had purpose, that they were connected to the mission. What are practical ways where businesses can create that sense of belonging for folks in other generations that are expecting them? What advice would you have for leaders?
Well, I'm laughing and smiling because now I see a lot of millennial leaders talking about Gen Z being out of touch.
We talked about that exact thing, actually, in the last episode.
It's about full circle. As a Gen X, I'm before you. I'm like, see, I told you. And I'm sure the boomers said the same thing about us Gen X, right? My firm belief is that when you create inclusive cultures that incorporate, that account for the voices with the least amount of power within an organization. So even if you're a company that says, oh, we are egalitarian, we're a very lateral company, there's no hierarchies, there's always someone within the organization with the least amount of power. And if you create a company that is inclusive of everyone within that organization, where your voice matters, even though you might be an individual contributor or the lowest ranking person on the team, then everyone within that organization benefits. Because what it is about creating cultures of psychological safety and trust. And when you can make everyone within an organization feel like their voice matters, everyone within that organization can learn from each other and they are empowered to speak up. And some of your most profound, powerful, out of the box thinking comes from people you least expect. It could come from an EA. It could be from a junior marketer within your team, right? But that sense of psychological safety and innovation and creativity doesn't happen in a vacuum. In my generation, Gen X, it was built around command and control. And clearly that wasn't effective. If build organizations that are truly inclusive and you work at building empowering everyone within the organization, it benefits all. It's that example of when my friend works. So one of my roles in the past was a company called Essential Accessibility. And it really focused on creating accessible websites that were compliant. And what was powerful is when you created accessible website, it benefited everyone. Because me, now in my 40s, my eyesight is going a little bit hard, difficult to read letterings and read. It now benefits me, even though I'm not technically disabled when it comes to my vision. But I am, because my eyesight has degraded as I've gotten older. When you create systems and organizations that benefit the folks that need it the most, it impacts and influences the entire ecosystem.
One call out for the listeners that really resonated with me was taking a look at your organization and what voice has the least amount of power, and are you empowering that voice, but also doing things to support that individual. I think is a really unique way to look at it. Sometimes we miss that, especially in cultures that may be doing exceptionally well. There's still going to be that opportunity to improve. The journey that you've been on, another guest we had recently, Nita Malik, talked about her journey of writing her book, and it was fascinating. That's one thing I mentioned in the beginning here. I love talking to published authors. What drove you to get into writing books, and what is some of the process recommendations you would give to our listeners?
It's funny you imagine Mita, because I have her book right next to me. And it's an amazing book. Wall Street Journal bestselling author. First off, my history, I read a lot. So even when I was little, when I was 5 or 6, I would read. I would constantly be reading. I remember my first year at Stanford University, we went to a fraternity party. My friends had lost me. They couldn't find me. And they found me like an hour later. I was like behind a sofa reading a book at a party, which tells you the type of person I am. I'm more of an introvert. I've always gotten lost in words. And so since I was 12, it was my dream to write a book. But then life happens. And then the what ifs and the I can't. Who would want to read my book? And then you become a parent, and then you work these high demanding jobs where there's not enough time to go to the bathroom, let alone write a book, right? It's just not possible. And so then you give up on your dreams. And then a few years ago, it was the second year of COVID, and I hadn't seen my mom in 2 years because we live in New York. She lives in California. My mom has advanced stage dementia now. And so I took 2 months off and took my daughter to go see my mom. And we were in LA. And I was sitting with my mom on her dining table. She was maybe on the right of me, and my daughter was on the left of me. And I just started thinking about my mom and how she sacrificed so much for us growing up. My mom was a hairdresser. She worked 7 days a week, 11, 12 hours a day. She supported our entire family of 5 she never made more than $15,000 a year. And there was no vacations. There was no chasing dreams. And once I got financially secure, once my brothers got financially secure and could support her, she got dementia and she was too old to actually live this life, right? And I started thinking about just how much she sacrificed for me. And I would be doing a disservice to her if I didn't go all out, if I didn't live a big life, if I didn't chase my dreams. And so I was looking at my mom and I was just like, I can't let go of my dreams. And then I was looking to the left of me at my daughter and I would realize that she's looking at me as her role model. And if I don't live my life big, if I don't chase my dreams, what lesson am I trying to teach her? So that was kind of the spark of where I started to realize that I needed to write this book, whatever the book was. I didn't really know what I was writing at first. But before that, which got me to how I started the book, I was posting every day, first as Community of Seven, because I was at Fortune magazine, got laid off, and I started Community of Seven, started a LinkedIn page, didn't have any marketing budget because I just got laid off. My husband got laid off. We were paying multiple mortgages. And so because of that, I was like, okay, I'm just going to post every day as Community 7. I quickly grew that to 250,000 followers on LinkedIn. And then at this point, when I was sitting between my mom and my daughter, I started posting that day as myself. And my first post was a selfie with me and my mom talking about this topic of living your life and sacrifice. And that the most of my leadership learnings was from my mom, this woman who never made more than 15,000 a year. And some of my best leadership lessons were from her. And so that's when I started posting as myself and then grew that on LinkedIn, 150,000, and then Facebook about 50,000. And so that daily posting became the impetus for my book. And so that's how it launched.
That is an incredible story. Everyone that has parents or others that raise you, call them every now and then, just said thank you. They all put up with us in one way or another and put us on the path that we're on. And the journey that you've been on with the book, now it's published, now it's out there and doing incredibly well. Yeah. What's one thing you wish you would have known at the beginning that you now know?
Honestly, I'm a firm believer, and I live this and I talk about it in this book, is that there are no mistakes. There are no failures. Everything is a lesson. And of course, there's ways I could have optimized things better, but the ups and downs, the journey, the mistakes I had to take. Not too many people know this, but I originally was going to publish it under this Lion Crest imprint of Scribe Media, and it's like a hybrid publishing. They ended up going bankrupt, and everyone within the imprint basically, for lack of a better term, got screwed, right? So I had finished my first manuscript, was supposed to have it go through editing and all of the different processes, the book cover, all this other stuff. And we got a notice, all 200 authors or so, maybe there's 100 authors, that the book's not going to get published through Lioncrest, or if it is, you have to pay. And so that was a huge kind of moment where I almost gave up, but then I leaned on my friends and I talked to friends like Mita and other friends that I had, and they were like, you have to keep on growing, you have to keep on grinding. That's probably the closest to a mistake, but at the same time, I don't regret the journey because it made me stronger.
And what moment, if you're willing to share, out in the wild, either seeing your book or someone recognizing you, what was just a fun moment that's happened to you so far?
Yeah. One of the big moments was someone had emailed me a picture and they were going on a flight to Mexico. And someone was reading my book on a flight to Mexico. And there's something really powerful about someone you not knowing reading your book on a plane to some random place. And since then, I've gotten many more from different areas. I get like emails from people like just, oh, I went to my friend's house and your book was, on their table. And for me, that's super powerful. I just spoke at an event in Saudi Arabia and had a book signing. And I remember it was supposed to start at 10. And I was like, okay, I'm going to come 5 minutes early. I was like, I hope someone shows up. I got there and I saw this huge, huge line. And I was like, I wonder who they're like in line for. And I went closer and I realized it was my book signing, and some people had waited in line for 2 hours. And so the line was literally like a block, 2 blocks long. It was a really long line that went outside of the venue. And I was like, wow. And this is Saudi Arabia. And so in that line, because it was an international conference, there were people from Africa, Asia, from just everywhere around the globe. And I was like, for me, it's so empowering that my words can help someone reading it. Like for me, that is the biggest reward as a writer.
That had to be a surreal moment.
It was,
see the lie.
yeah, it was completely surreal. I was like, why are they waiting in line? And I got a post, and the organizer, the person that was doing the logistics, there were 3 or 4 of them. They were like, they're here for you. I was like, me?
Fantastic. I love that story. That is phenomenal. And to transition us now, what is 1 or 2 bits of advice that you would give to all of our founders that are listeners?
Start with your why. I know Simon Sinek has said it before, but it's important to start with what matters most to you. Why are you here? So, for example, is this lightning, or can I go a little bit long?
You can go a little bit longer. There's no rules here.
Okay. So why you start with your why. In the past, I would find a job because it had good pay, it had a title, it had prestige, and that was my criteria. And then what I realized, and then what I told myself is once I find that career, I'm going to build my life around it. And inevitably, what would happen is that career would just take more and more space. And when I clarified that in terms of my value, that my family was the most important thing to me, it changed everything, because even though I knew it in my heart that my family was most important to me, it didn't become my North Star. But once I figured out that my family is the most important to me, now I build the life that I value, which the 4 most important things to me is my family, my faith, being of service to others, and freedom. But none of the jobs I had in my past fulfilled any of those. And so I'd wonder why I would be so miserable because I'd come home at 10 o'clock at night, or I'd be traveling 85% of the time and not see my husband and my daughter. And so when I started living my values, what's most important to me, my why, and then building my career around it, everything changed. And so that doesn't mean you have to be a founder, because you could be working for a company, and that could mean creating more boundaries. Because a lot of times what I've noticed, because people have these busy careers and all this other stuff. And I remember I was in the office. This is when I had a corporate office job. It was 11 o'clock at night, and I was the only one there. And I knew all of the janitors by first name. They knew me. And I had a realization. It's not the job that is overworking me. It's me. It's me not creating boundaries. It's me equating success with grinding, being the hardest worker in the room. And I was slowly killing myself. So sometimes it is the company and the organizations, but sometimes it is our mindset and our thirst for approval and not creating boundaries. And so what happens is what happens to high achievers? They get a lot done, so they get more work. They get more work. They get more work. And they over-deliver. But there's a point where you have nothing left to give. And that's why so many high achievers get burnt out. So, long story, long answer. Start with your why.
Hey, it's a quality answer. I really enjoyed that. You've also built quite the social media presence, but for those that don't know your background, very extensive background in advertising, marketing. So what advice would you give to someone that's building their personal brand. Doesn't have to necessarily be building a large following as the goal, but personal brand.
I would say just one thing, which is focus on helping one person. So many people are so fixated with how many likes they get, how many impressions they get. I see this all the time on LinkedIn with people screaming at the algorithms, oh, LinkedIn hates me and I'm not getting as many views. My criteria since day one, and still is to this day, is did I help one person reading my post? That's it. And if I could help one person, that post, whether it gets 100 likes or 50,000 likes and 1 million impressions, which I've gotten, for me, it's the same thing. Of course, it's nice and whoa to see a post get 40, 50,000 likes and 1 million impressions. Don't get me wrong. But for posts that don't do as well, and let's say I just get, 50 likes and maybe just 1,000 impressions. If I help one person reading that post, then it's a success. Focus on being of service to others, and then the rest will come.
That's fantastic advice. And to close us out here, just 2 more questions from my side. You were able to attend the Troop HR retreat this year in Naples, Florida. What was a takeaway that you had from the retreat?
What makes that retreat is so special. And it's a one event that I look forward to each year. But what's so powerful is Tracy and the team have really created this community where people actually really care for each other and look after each other and want to uplift each other. And I think the big takeaway is there's power in your community and there's power in uplifting each other. But you have to get out of your comfort zone, because me as an introvert, I remember the first time Tracy invited me, I was like, oh, because this is second year into COVID, right? Things started getting back to normal, but I hadn't really been to many conferences. That was maybe my second one. And I was like, I don't know about being around people, because for me, I really enjoy being alone. I really do. And so the thought of networking and talking to people, I was like, oh. But then once you get into it and you just really interact with other kind, amazing people, you get energized with it. And so for me, it's like getting out of your comfort zone, but you have to actively pursue it and you have to be open to it.
Completely agree. And the final question, which hopefully is the easiest one here, how can people connect with you and get a copy of your book?
Well, you can Do This Daily anywhere books are sold, Walmart, Amazon, etc. But please, after you read it, leave an honest review on Amazon, because that's how you give authors a big bear hug. And make sure you also review Mita's book, Reimagined Inclusion. As you can see, me and Mita are really good friends. But after you read the book, that's how you give hugs to authors. You can find me on LinkedIn, just search Lan Phan. On Instagram, it's still new to me, on Facebook, and follow Community of 7 as well. So those are the best places to reach me. And if you ever need leadership development training or speaker, I'm your gal.
That's fantastic. And for listeners, as always, we will have the links to those in the description. So please check that out, get a copy, and write a great review. Lan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It was a pleasure having you on.
A pleasure talking and connecting with you too.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Troop HR podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. If you would like to learn more about our community, please visit troophr.com. In the meantime, keep living the dream.